Hey, okay, is that it? All right. So, uh, for the curious, what was going on is I have a setup so that I can run a trial of the stream. I noticed in the last, and a couple of you mentioned, so thank you very much for that. In the last stream that I was dropping frames or falling, the stream was falling out for a little bit, and so I did a lot of playing around with Twitch as an inspector tool to analyze the frame rate and if you're going to lose any information while streaming. And in playing with that, I then changed my setup. So, all right, cool. Well, hello and welcome. I will start over again here on the top then. I lost my monitoring, so I can't quite hear what you're hearing, but let me know in the chat if you need more or less of me or of the game or any of that kind of stuff. Also, if you're getting echo sounds, hopefully that's not going to happen. All right. Let me say we flip over here then. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. So, this week we're going to be exploring Lassen National Park. Now, Lassen National Park is a volcanic national park in Northern California. And as usual, we'll do kind of an overview of the park. We'll fly around in the flight plan, which for those of you with Microsoft Flight Simulator, if you want to join in, the flight plan is right here. And this will take you to actually two very pretty airports in the area. Kind of a fun way to explore it along with. So for those of you who are new, each week I pick a new national park to explore with you. We'll visit some of the big attractions, we'll talk a bit about the park and its history, and then we'll enjoy the beautiful views from the sky. Like I mentioned, for those of you with a copy of Microsoft Flight Simulator, it's sort of a fly-in, so feel free to join and fly along. A couple of disclaimers around that. I'm ignoring some of the laws about flying in national parks. If you're curious to learn more about those, we can always talk about it. Ignoring some of the safety concerns. We'll adhere to the laws of physics, but we'll pretty much push it. So yes, I am a pilot, but we'll be taking full advantage of the simulator to do this exploration of the park. Another bit about how the stream works. So I've researched the park in preparation and ensured that any and all information you hear tonight is added with sources to the National Park Wiki page. I pulled the sources direct from the National Park site and then augmented any of the information that I could, added photos, enriched it, that sort of thing. And I'll be using that as my main final result for reference. So if you're curious for spoilers, you can go and read the wiki page and you'll get quite a bit of information that'll be talked about here. The reason I like to use the wiki pages as this source is it's the best possible way to make sure that the information is fact-checked by others. And then it's a way to give back to that kind of living body of knowledge. So if you notice anything that was missing or incorrect needing to be updated, please don't hesitate to go and fix the wiki page. As the wiki community often says, be bold and make the updates. All right, so without further ado, I'm Jules Altus, and I'll be your pilot for this evening. As always, thank you for being my co-pilot. So let's see if we can do, and a question for the chat as we get started here. So I mentioned that I do have my pilot's license, and I do love airplanes. This one in particular is pretty cool. It's a Baron six-seater. The back has this kind of like facing planes. I haven't historically talked about the planes in the stream, but if people want to know more about like what I'm thinking for the takeoff or what's going on, let me know in the chat. I'm happy to answer questions. The stream's really about the national park and about exploring it together. But I do love airplanes, so if you'd like to hear more of that in the future, just let me know. All right, so let's start off here. We're going to do a quick takeoff roll. So this is a Beechcraft Baron, it's called. It's got two engines. It rotates just about here. Part of the reason I picked this plane is that it can climb very, very quickly. So I roll out, you guys can get a little bit of a better view of this we're seeing here. So let's see if we can give a look out the window. That's Eagle Lake on the left here. And what we're going to be doing, don't really need ATC going. Hey, have you ever seen a volcano? Thank you, Fractals in Need. Invalid parameter. Alright, so let me try my other trick for today. So I have another scene here that makes the iPad big. So let's look at where we're actually going to be going. So today we're going to be flying over. Let's start and look at where we are relative to the world. So we're up in the northern part of California here. Oops, you can see I have a couple of notes. I went flying last week, so I have a couple of notes from that flight still in here. We're going to be flying over this part of California to Lassen National Park. So one of the other things that I'm trying out this week is I'm actually able to take the park map and overlay it in the map of the world. So as we fly along, hopefully you can actually orient yourself within that park. So when you go and visit, you'll have already a good sense of what these things are. So we're starting off to the east of the park. We're going to fly in. Fantastic lava beds and cinder cone. And then we're going to fly across the park and talk about Lassen Peak and the northwestern entrance. We'll bop down to the southern entrance, talk about the Pacific Crest Trail, and then finish up at Juniper Lake and talk about some of the glacial lakes at Volcanic National Park, or Lassen National Park. All right, so we got a little bit of a flight over there though, so why don't I flip back to this? Nice, thanks Fractals are neat. So let me know when those poll results come in. I'll be curious to learn more. So I'll flip out of this view so you can see a little bit more of what the area looks like. Let me make sure that I'm covering everything I want to talk about. Oh, okay, so one quick sidebar as we get started here. The shape of the park is pretty interesting. It's this very intricate sort of like lines and lines all over the place, and I was really curious when they passed the congressional act declaring it a park and establishing Lassen. How did they end up doing that? Like, is it GPS coordinates or what? And it's like 2 pages of just describing every single corner intersection in that park. But if you're ever looking for some light reading, the National Park Establishment congressional laws are not the place to go. Okay. So, Lassen National Park. The overview that they give on their Twitter I actually really liked as kind of a starting point. So it's hundreds of glacially carved lakes, boiling pools of acid, all 4 types of volcanoes, and a beautiful, glittering, dark night sky. So Lassen Volcanic National Park is an American national park in northeastern California. The dominant feature of the park, oops, I'm not showing the right thing. The dominant feature of the park is Lassen Peak, the largest plugged dome volcano in the world. Oh no, my controller just disconnected. Oh no! The slow plane crash. Okay, I don't
Sync rate.
think
Sync
I can
rate.
do this with the computer in time. Oofed, technical issues just across the board. Alright, well, we'll see if that comes back in. Sorry, folks. Practice as much as you want, but it was a little bit tricky on the actual day of, right? Okay, so this is going to be very hard to fly this plane without the controller. Oh man. Cool. So there is actually a recommendation in streams to have a technical difficulties screen, which I considered doing for this week, but I put all my time towards researching, and now I'm feeling like that would have been a pretty useful screen. So, all right, well, let me see if I can get this controller connected back on. So Lassen. It is one of the few national parks in the world, or one of the few areas in the world, where you can see all 4 types of volcanoes. So there's the plug dome, the shield, cinder cone, and the stratus volcano. Oops, that's not good. I want this. Um, okay, Judah, we'll be right back. Yeah, that's right. Quick commercial break here. Yeah. Um, there's definitely a way to quick fix this. I'm just going to do a little bit of backup as well. So I'm wiring my controller into the computer. Which is rough, but that's alright. Alright, let's see how that works. We get our controller back. Hey, there we go. Alright. Cool. We're not too far from our destination. Okay. Alright, so let's turn around here. We'll get facing back to Lassen National Park. Retract those landing gear. And those flaps, okay. Alright, so 4 types of volcanoes in Lassen National Park. The plug dome, the shield, cinder cone, and the stratovolcano. We'll talk a little bit about each of those in more detail in just a bit. The source of heat for the volcanism in Lassen area is the subduction of the Gorda Plate diving below the North American Plate off the northern California coast. And I'll show a photo of that a little bit later on. It kind of explains what that looks like. The area surrounding Lassen Peak is still active with boiling mud pots, fumaroles, and hot springs. Lassen Volcanic National Park is started as 2 separate national monuments designated by President Theodore Roosevelt in 1907. Those original national monuments were the Cinder Cone National Monument, which is our first stop on this trip. And the second one is the Lassen Peak National Monument. What happened was, stratovolcano sounds like Sharknado type movie. Yeah, that's true. That's true. I feel like a Stratonado? It seems like a rough start for a movie plot. We'll workshop it a little bit. So what happened was President Theodore Roosevelt established these national monuments in 1907, and then in 1914, Lassen Peak started erupting. And so eruptions in the area lasted from 1914 to 1917, a series of major and minor eruptions. And so the Congress decided that it would be a good time to declare that area a national park, partially because of the eruptive activity and the fact that having a little bit of oversight in the area would be very useful, and then also because it's just a beautiful park, and you can kind of see it now in the image off in the distance. That big looming peak off straight ahead of us is where we're going. That's Lassen Peak. Alright, let me see if I can pull up a picture real quick. You can see this explosion in 1905. Let's see how it works. So that is Lassen Peak when it exploded, and I think this is a 1915 photo. So. So the park itself then was established officially in August 9th of 1916. I like to imagine everyone in Congress sitting around going like,
Destination A was is
118.2 literally
118.2
exploding. We need to do something about this now. Okay. Fractals are neat. What was the straw pull on this? It's a good sized volcano. Yeah. Hey, poll results, look at that. Climbed the summit and saw lava. Wow, most people have climbed the summit and saw lava. That's pretty cool. I have climbed the summit of a volcano in Hawaii, and I did not see lava. But I did get to see the top, which was pretty cool. Would highly recommend it. Alright, so as we're making our way to the fantastic lava beds and cinder cone, a little bit of history on the park. So, European immigrants in the mid-19th century used Lassen Peak as a landmark on their trek to the fertile Sacramento Valley. So that's the northern half of the Valley of California. One of the guides to these immigrants was a Danish blacksmith named Peter Lassen, who settled in Northern California in the 1930s. Lassen Peak was named after him. The Nobles Immigrant Trail was later cut through the park and past Cinder Cone and the fantastic lava beds. So that's the area we're going to start at, is where the Nobles Immigrant Trail passed through. More recent history: after the 1980 Mount St. Helens eruption, the USGS intensified its monitoring of active and potentially active volcanoes in the Cascade Range. This is the range that Lassen is in. I'm going to show you actually a little bit. Apparently Paul doesn't know how apostrophes work. Yeah, a common problem, it turns out. Apostrophes are often overlooked. It says, okay, so this Cascade Range, let me see if I can pull up on here. So one of the other ones that I loaded up beforehand is this Cascade Sierra Province. So this is the province, the geological physiographic province map, excuse me. So this is sort of like common geological properties, includes things like Mount Rainier and the Northern Cascades National Park, and Lassen Peak down here. So you can see this sort of like long, thin blue area of the Cascade Sierra Province. So that's what they were talking about. And when Mount St. Helens erupted, the National Park Service kind of said, oh, well, we should probably monitor all the volcanoes in this area, huh? So they started ramping up monitoring to make sure that they would have a plan in place should they ever need it, which is really encouraging, to be honest, seeing the blast radius of the previous launch. Okay. So now we're kind of approaching the edge of the park. We just crossed into it. So I'm going to bring it down over to a local area. So like I mentioned, the Cinder Cone is one of the two parts of the park that previously were the national monument. So you can see just down there off my right wing here, there's this sort of cone-shaped object, a little bit of snow, and then these fields off in the base. Let me see if I can get a targeted view inside the actual plane. So, oops. It's very interesting. So let me see if I can show you out the wing then. So the Cinder Cone is this cone shape, and I was pleased with how well the game captured that kind of cone look. I'll pull up a photo in a moment, you can see it. But really, really impressed. But also, let me know if the plane is like yelling. I can't hear at the moment. It's going very fast for what it's designed to be flying at. So actually, I can kind of slow it down a bit. But then off back here, so we have the Cinder Cone, and then just behind it you can see these sort of like painted dunes off to the right, just over my right wing right now. And then what's called the fantastic lava fields. So let me show you a couple of these photos real quick. You can see what that looks like. So there's the Cinder Cone itself, which has got this kind of like black look. And I'll talk about the different types of volcanoes in just a moment. We can hear a bit more about where that comes from. From the aerial, there's an infrared version of it, so you can see sort of what that area looks like. So if I go back to here, then that area that you're looking at right out the window is the area that was in that photo. And then last but not least, the painted dunes are a really neat part of this park, and the trail goes right alongside them. So cool views, like the overlays. Thank you very much. I had a lot of fun figuring out how to make those kind of work. Hopefully it's less disorienting than actually flipping all over the place. Mount St. Helens is awesome. Definitely go check it out if you have the opportunity. Totally agree. Fractals are neat. Mount St. Helens, it's a neat one to go and see. Thanks. Yeah, the cloud transitions are kind of fun, right? A little bit of spice. Shout out to Xbox Master for helping with that one. All right, so let's pull ourselves around here. We'll start back on our trek. So I mentioned that I'll talk a little bit about the 4 types of volcanoes. So those again are the plug dome, shield, cinder cone, and stratovolcano. I attempted to make food analogies for all of them. It only worked for 2 of them, but we'll talk about them anyway. So cinder cone, which is the one just off our left wing here, the one we just passed over, you can think of like a popcorn popper. So it was a transition. I couldn't tell if close this time. Not nice. Yeah, it's a new transition. Okay. So that's the cinder cone is kind of like a popcorn popper. And so basically what happens is, quick fly this airplane. As the gas-charged lava is blown violently into the air, it breaks into small fragments that solidify and fall as either cinders, clinkers, or scoriae around the vent to form a cone that is often cylindrical, with slopes of about 30 degrees. And then most cinder cones have a bowl-shaped crater at the summit, and that's what you were seeing when we got close. It had that very classic sort of volcano shape. The shield volcano then is more like layers of lava flows, and you can think of it like an artist's paintbrush, just painting layer after layer of lava as it builds up. So the shield volcanoes end up being then very large, and I'm pointing us at our window at Prospect Peak here, which is a shield volcano in the park. So this is one example of that. Mauna Loa in Hawaii is another shield volcano. That kind of like slow buildup of layers of lava over time. All right, taking a long trip around here. So that was the transition to the Bob Ross volcanoes, if you will. Yeah, that's right, the Bob Ross volcanoes. I feel like the shield volcanoes would appreciate that. They get talked about because they often look like rolling hills, and so if you don't know you're looking at a volcano, you wouldn't even be aware of it. All right, now we're heading back over to Lassen. You can see off in the distance here. Okay, so that's our first 2 types of volcanoes. We have a cinder cone and a shield. The next one is a plug dome volcano, and that's Lassen, which you can see now off in the distance in that peak. And this is when thick magma erupts to the surface, forming a steep, dome-shaped landform. So lava domes can form within the crater of like a large composite volcano or stratovolcano. Plug dome and lava dome, people use the terms interchangeably. So like I mentioned, Lassen Peak is an example of this, and then Chaos Crags, which we'll actually head over to, we'll pass over that in just a minute, is another example of that sort of thing. And then the last type of volcano is a composite volcano. And these are also called stratovolcanoes, or stratonados. Just kidding. These result of multiple eruptions, and these are the volcanoes. Yeah, that is true. The kind of plug dome has that classic volcano shape, and it also is the kind. Obviously, they can all erupt, but the plug dome is that kind of like big eruptions sort of one, or the composite. And what a composite volcano, the stratovolcano, is when multiple eruptions deposit ash, lava, and cinder, layer after layer. And so back to the food analogy, you can think of a composite volcano as sort of like a layered cake. Mount St. Helens and Mount Rainier are both stratovolcanoes, so if you see those. And then we'll fly over a little bit later a volcano called Rokoff Mountain, which was originally Mount Tahama, and that's a composite volcano. That's was previously in the park and is no longer around. So we'll see that a little bit. Okay, so here we are coming into the main part of the park. Now, there's a couple of ones that I want to show. Do people prefer the view inside the plane or the view out of the plane? Because they're, I always think this one's a little bit more picturesque, but it's a little less flyy. For this part, we'll use this view at least. Okay, so right in the foreground here is what's called Chaos Crags. And Chaos Crags is the most recent, or the youngest group of lava domes in Lassen Volcanic National Park. And I'll show you something else in the iPad. Well, as we're passing it, let me show you on the ground. That right there is called Chaos Jumbles. So, two quick notes about Chaos Crags. Unlike Lassen Peak, it has not been altered by glacial activity, and so Chaos Crags is a very, very spiny, roots-looking formation. And here I can show you the view that we have right now. Sort of looks like this. So we can get a little bit better. So that's what you're seeing back in the game. So two things happened Chaos Crags. One is that it's the youngest volcanoes, and I'll show you where the vents are on those in a second. But that Chaos Jumbles, this odd-looking formation down here, is a rock avalanche that undermined Chaos Craig's southwestern slope 300 years ago. So riding on a cushion of compressed air, the rock debris traveled about 100 miles per hour and flattened the forest before it, also damming up Manzanita Creek, which then forms Manzanita Lake, which is this little lake that's off my wing over there. So Chaos Crags, Chaos Jumbles, and then a rock dam that forms the lake in this corner of the park. Let me zoom in here a little bit. You can see that there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of stuff going on in this corner. So we have the Lomas Lomas Museum, and Visitor Center over in this entry, as well as I believe there's like gift drops and that sort of thing. So you can see those buildings down in the base there. That would be where you'd go if you wanted to see the Lomas Museum. All right, let's fly our way back over past Lassen Peak. One thing that I'll pull up real quick as we're getting into some of the more core volcanoes. Great graphics. Thank you, Stacy. So all the beige part is the rock slide area, correct? Yeah.
Sync rate.
So I can kind of angle it over here. All that part is where the rock slide was, and you can see it if you look at like a Google Earth. Even now, it still has that sort of look to it. Oops. All right, I'm gonna have to do a quick climb here. So while we're looking at that, I'm gonna attempt to climb in the background of the plane, and pull up something here so you can see something else interesting. So the park itself, this is the geologic map, which is kind of interesting. Yeah, there's the National Park Service has a ton of maps if you're interested in that. But the one I actually wanted to show you is, oh, excuse me, I have it in here. That's why. That's right. So the piece of it that's interesting is that there's, oh, this plane is about to fly into the side of a mountain. Oh no. Okay, we'll move that back up. So yeah. Let me quick reposition things a little bit. If you look at a map of the vents in the area, you'll see that Craig's has like 7 or 8 vents that are all right there. There's one vent then at the top of Lassen, and a couple more throughout the park, but we talk about it being the youngest part. That's the most recent kind of most recent activity going on there. Okay, get ourselves reset here. Kind of cheating, but that's okay. All right, so Lassen Peak over here then. A little bit about the geology here. So the Sierra Nevada, where the Sierra Nevada ends is where the Cascade volcanoes begin. So this chain of explosive volcanic centers forms an arc-shaped band extending from British Columbia to Northern California, roughly parallel to the Pacific coastline. Within this region, there's 13 major volcanic centers that lie in a sequence, like a string of explosive pearls. The Cascades are made up of thousands of short-lived volcanoes built on volcanic debris, and included in that list is like the ones up in Washington as well. So, and this part of the Cascades define the Pacific Northwest section of what's called the Pacific Ring of Fire. Let me show you. this real quick is kind of a useful piece to understanding what it is. So you can see kind of Washington up at the top and Lassen volcano then at the very bottom here, how the tectonic plates that are subducting then create that down in the bottom point. So that's the kind of tectonic plate activity that's creating a Lassen peak like this. Turn this thing around so you can see. All right, so we have a couple of other interesting pieces. Yeah, let me go. Oops, I flipped from my flight plan. So let me turn around real quick and we'll come back up here. We can talk about the southern entrance. So what we're doing now is actually entering kind of from the southern direction of the park.
Sink rate.
And so that road just below us is the road that you would take if you were going to enter the park from the southeast. So if I zoom in here,
500.
you can see the park map loaded up here. So just off to the left there, you can see that's the entrance and the visitor center. And then the road curves along the mountain here, cuts its way all the way up towards the base of Lassen Peak. This particular area is interesting because it is where Broke-Off Mountain is. So that little peak off the back corner there is called Broke-Off Mountain. And this whole area, you can kind of see the shape still. All used to be one large volcano called Mount Tamaha. Is a stratovolcano. And approximately 350,000 years ago, its cone collapsed in on itself and formed a 2-mile-wide caldera after it emptied its throat and partially did the same to its magma chamber in one series of eruptions. We're coming up on Lake Helen here, which is a very pretty lake along the park. I'll show a photo of that in just a moment. This is sort of the photo that they use of Lassen. All right. This is like actually pretty interesting because like I said, the game will accommodate that kind of stuff. That is why you don't fly in mountains outside of a simulator like this. You got to get a little bit more of a strategy for it. Let me see. Great graphics, tectonic plate image still up. Oh no! Thank you. Okay. See if I can bring this up a little bit so I can see them. And then, okay. Well, that was probably for the best, actually. Alright, so what we're doing now then is curving along what's called Bumpus Hell. And Bumpus Hell is one of the more famous thermal active areas of the park. Let's see if I can get a good view on it. So it kind of curves into the side here. It's really cool in person, yeah. I was gonna say I was looking at photos in Rosno and was very unsatisfied with how the game depicted it. Like I really wanted it to be as cool as it looked in the photos, and it just wasn't living up to it. Alright, so we're gonna turn around here. Any of the other parts of the park that you particularly enjoyed? Alright, so Bumpus Hell is just coming up right here. I'll see if I can climb up a little bit more. Okay, so this is part of Mount Tahamas, that old composite volcano I mentioned. Its main vent And it comes from a the name comes after, or it's this is Bumpus Hell in the game, which is very unsatisfying. So let me pull up a photo so you can see what it looks like in the real life, the one that in-laws and I probably saw. So this is a little bit more accurate of what it looks like, which is pretty cool. And the boardwalk extends a lot outside of this photo. It's a neat place to go visit. So it's named after Kendall Van Hook Bumpus, a cowboy and early settler who worked in the Lassen Peak area in the 1860s. Excuse me. Bumpus discovered the geothermal feature and was named a mining claim for the area. In 1865, he took a trip with an independent newspaper, and he accidentally broke through the thin crust and above a scalding hot, bubbling pot. So don't do that in these thermal areas. That's why you need to stay on the trail. So his leg was badly scalded, and eventually it had to be amputated. For that reason, they named the area in his honor. The Sulphurworks area was fun, very easy to get to from the road too. Yeah, the Sulphurworks one, I can show you on the iPad real quick. I tried to find a good photo of Sulphurworks and I just couldn't. It seemed really neat, especially so if you look, you enter the park and then right away you're greeted by Sulphurworks here. And yeah, it looked really neat. It looked like a cool hike that you would be able to just kind of hop over to on your way in. Alright, so we'll do a quick turn around here as we're leaving through the southern part of the park. So this sort of view and the rolling hills up to it is what you see as you're driving in. So the last kind of part of this thing is let me see if there's anything else that I need to cover. A couple of other sort of fun facts about the park. Rosalind, did you get to see the park at night? That's supposed to be a pretty incredible look. So they host a dark sky festival every year, and this year was their first virtual one. It seemed honestly, it seemed like a pretty cool setup from what I could tell. But let me pull up a photo real quick. I can show you what that looks like. So yeah, they put out telescopes on the top of the mountain. They look at the stars, and it's a big party and fun activity to go and see. No, we only had a day in the park. Yeah, I was surprised actually. They have a lot of these parks are very opinionated about the number of days you should spend there, which sort of makes sense. But Lassen was sort of like, yeah, you can see the park in a day and get a pretty good sense of it. Which, like, you know, yeah, the whole area is really beautiful from what I can tell. All right, so just below the plane here, there's this kind of oddly colored lake, and that's Boiling Springs. Let me show you a quick photo of Boiling Springs. So can you see the stars if you turn up the game at night? Yes, you can see the stars if you turn the game at night. Here, I will do that briefly because it only takes a moment. Flip it to like, there we go. I took a little while and I was gonna do, and the stars are supposed to be modeled correctly, so there's the moon will be in the right phase and the stars in the right location and that kind of thing. In the first two, let's see, in the first two streams, I spent some time in flying at night, and what I'm finding, 500, and it sort of makes sense, is a lot of the parks are starting to really market this sort of dark sky aspect of them, because it's one of the few places you can really see the stars and kind of their full awe-inspiring beauty. So Big Bend and Voyagers, the last two parks we went to, both had that. They were working on that dark sky international dark sky designation. I didn't use anything like that for Lassen, but they have a Dark Sky Festival that they host, which is a pretty good alternative. So, all right, so now we're passing Boiling Springs. The other piece that I'll mention here, just below us, and the game doesn't really render it. I tried to find a place that would have it highlighted. Is the Pacific Crest Trail. So I'll zoom in here and you can kind of see. Has anyone hiked the Pacific Crest Trail or parts of it before? Especially there's Pacific Crest Trail is that green line. You can see it kind of winds around the park and cuts over. So I got to do a little bit of the Pacific Crest Trail a number of years ago, and would highly recommend if you ever get the chance. It's a wonderful place to go and see, and it seems like they really picked the route to showcase some of the most beautiful parts of the country. You have to let it go. Stop posting links. I don't know what the posting links running is. Okay, so Pacific Crest Trail, for those who don't know, is officially designated as the Pacific Crest National Scenic Trail. And it's a long-distance hiking and equestrian trail closely aligned with the highest portion of the Cascade and Sierra Nevada mountain ranges, which lie about 100 miles east of the U.S. Pacific coast, which includes Lassen. The trail starts in the very north of the country, the Canadian-U.S. border, and goes all the way to the very south of the country in the U.S.-Mexico border. It passes through Oregon, California, and Washington along the way. So this is the route. This will most certainly come up in future streams because it passes through a number of national parks, which sort of makes sense. So you can see Lassen right here at 23. Right, so what we have here is Juniper Lake, which I heard was recommended for camping. If you are inclined to go camping, it's supposed to be a great place because you get those wonderful views of Lassen right there, and then you can see Cinder Cone as well as Prospect Peak off to the right. So it's a sort of like really picturesque way to visit the park. What else? So the last little bit about these lakes all around. So if you see on the map, you can see these lakes kind of everywhere, and Juniper Lake as well. So these lakes are glacial lakes. So they were during the Wisconsin glacial, they call them episode. The park was covered in glaciers, and it dug out a lot of these lakes, including Lake Helen we saw earlier. Which I don't think I pulled up the photo, but let me show you sort of the classic one. This one's in. So this is Lake Helen and Lassen Peak. So Lake Helen is also a glacial lake. So a lot of the glaciers in the area originated around Lassen Peak, and then would slide down from there and carve out these beautiful glacial lakes. And so they're all over the park. You can see them just kind of dotting. So currently there are no glaciers in the park, but Lassen Peak does have 14 permanent snowfields. So if you ever see photos of it, there's always snow around. All right, a last little bit here on plants and animals in the park. There's a particular plant which I couldn't find a good public domain photo of, but if you're interested to see, the Lassen paintbrush. It's a very pretty local plant. As far as animals go, there were two really interesting ones that stood out. So one was the American pika, which if you haven't seen a pika before, it's kind of like it looks like a little rodent. Of course, my first thought was, oh, that must be, it's spelled P-I-K-A. It must be where Pikachu comes from, because it looks just like a little Pikachu rodent thing. So it turns out that Pikachu is actually based on the Japanese onomatopoeias of a couple of sounds, Pika being the sound of electricity and Chew being the sound a mouse makes. So there is no relation, but there is an American pika in the park if you go and want to look for it. The other adorable one is the Sierra Nevada red fox, and it's now one of the rarest mammals in California. But they've identified 20 individuals in and around Lassen Volcanic Park. So this is the largest known Sierra Nevada red fox population. So that's what the red fox look like, which is honestly adorable. And of course that leads to my favorite social distancing guide I have yet seen. And I did notice these on the other parks, and I'm wondering if it's a trend. But I wish I could zoom in a little bit on this one. There we go. So you can give 6 feet, or you can give yourself 12 American pikas, or you can give yourself 2 Nevada red foxes, or 0.87 sulfur works mud pots. If you could be one Pokemon, what would you be? Excellent question, Joshua. If I could be one Pokemon, and everyone else, you are more than welcome to post what Pokemon you would be in the chat as well. If I could be one Pokemon, so I've always thought Lapras had the best of all the worlds, because he's definitely the most versatile, and also it seems like a pretty cool. So Lapras, for those who don't know, is sort of like think like, I don't really know how to describe him. It's like a big sea creature that you can ride on and like dives and swims. It's got that kind of like freedom of a dolphin sort of feel, which is I'm always a sucker for that kind of thing. I think that's why I like to fly as well, actually, is that sort of like I'd be a ditto. Good question. Yeah, I mean ditto is kind of a cop out answer, but that's fair. Yeah, surf on his back, exactly. Yeah, that kind of
500.
Like, the surf on the back is hard to turn down. Yeah, it was so funny. I was researching for this and came across the American Pika, and I went, "Is this going to include Pokemon in this stream? Is that what's about to happen?" So I'm very glad that popped out. All right. Well, that's all I had for Lassen National Park. So why don't we do our good old sign off here? Let me post this survey in the chat, because I always forget to do that. One thing I'll mention, there's a Discord server for those of you on Discord who want to join. I grab little images from the stream each week, and you can use them for your emoting on different posts, and then also it's a good place to talk about the chat, or just to hang out, ask questions, whatever you want to do. So if you have a Discord already, it's Jules Altus is the name of the server. And what I should do is get a link to that as well for next week. So I have a quick link I can post on that one. So love to hear what you liked, didn't like, what you'd like to change. Always looking to improve the stream and make it more fun, more engaging, more chill, more anything. So feel free to leave some feedback, even if you already did in previous weeks. Always appreciate the extra input. Let me hop back on here. Get back to where I was in my plan for the first flight. There we go. Okay, so posted the survey in the chat. You guys call them Pikachus when we sell them, huh? Yeah, I feel like I'm gonna do that now. I hadn't heard of a Pika before, and it's suddenly my new favorite animal. So it's funny how fast that happens. Thank you, Stacy. So yeah, so we'll finish up there as we fly away from Lassen. So thank you all for joining. Cheesy sign off time. In a world full of adventures, I'm glad I could share this one with you. Thank you for being my co-pilot today.